Article 17 of the Realtor Code of Ethics makes it mandatory to use arbitration to resolve certain disputes amongst brokers and realtors. This week on Talking Real, we're exploring what that process is and how you can take advantage of it to resolve your disputes.
Because anything's better than getting sued.
Welcome back to Talking Real, brought to you by the Oklahoma Association of Realtors. This is episode 110 of Talking Real, back in the studio, away from our on the scene live at CapCon. You're here with Jeff and Nabil. And Nabil, tell us how your day is.
Day is fantastic. I feel like summer is trying to tease us right now.
Oh man, it's beautiful out there.
Or spring really is what it is. But you know, spring just is summer here.
Yeah, I kind of wish we were podcasting outside right now. It's so beautiful.
It is really nice outside.
Excited about that.
Yeah. How's your day going?
Man, my day's good. Just recovering from CapCon. You know, we had a great time at Capitol Conference. I appreciate everybody that has showed up and joined us out there for a day at the Capitol and everything else. Had the Oklahoma City Mayor, David Holt, came out and joined us. And Bill Shepard, a prominent national pollster, came in and talked to us about polling results and everything like that. That was very interesting. And then got to spend some time out at the Capitol. Had some legislators come in, the speaker, the leader of the Democratic caucus in the House, and Senator Stephanie Bice. She came out and joined us as well. So we had a really good time, really informative and just entertaining kind of day.
Yeah, it was a lot of good content from a lot of different levels.
For sure.
And I think that was interesting. And like you were saying, the pollster, Bill Shepard, man, that was some insight that you can get from numbers.
Yeah, yeah, we had a good time. We had a good time. So if you missed it, then you know what? We do this thing every year, so make sure you come out and join us. NAR's National Legislative Conference is going to be coming up later on this summer, so take a look out for that, assuming it doesn't get canceled for coronavirus.
Right, because everything's doing that.
Everything's getting canceled with coronavirus right now. So
like, I don't know if everyone out there saw NAR sent out a release.
Yeah.
Putting some travel restrictions on their staff and the couple of conferences that they had coming up.
Exactly. So a few of us are going to be going out to AEI, the Institute for Association Executives, next week, and that got canceled. And some travel restrictions for their employees. So yeah, people are taking this serious and making sure that we're keeping people on lockdown and not moving all over the place if they don't absolutely need to, so that we can get this thing under control. Yeah. So, be safe out there, but, educate yourself and be smart about it too. Know what you need to do.
Yeah.
So
it's funny. Like this whole time we're like, coronavirus, it's there.
Yeah.
It's happening. But now it's like affecting daily life.
Yeah, it's actually affected my life, which
right?
is,
which I didn't think was going to happen, but
right.
But here we are. So be careful out there. Wash your hands.
Absolutely.
And that's all you can do to prevent this.
There you go. Wash your hands, and if you're sick, stay home.
Yeah.
So, well, Nabil, this week we wanted to get into something a little code of ethics-y, a little professional standards-y. Those aren't real words.
Like your realm-y?
Yeah. This is, it's a good sort. Well, and it came up because we had an issue with arbitration today, so it's fresh on my mind, and thought it would be a good thing to talk about to make sure people understand kind of what arbitration is, what the obligations are, how you go about requesting arbitration, because it's a really fantastic service that we provide here at the State Association.
I think it is, and I feel like a lot of people know about the complaints and the professional standards part of this.
Yeah.
And then the arbitration is another fantastic service, like you were mentioning, that we just added. I think it was a little over a year ago.
Well, we added the mediation and expanded that.
Mediate, that's what it was.
But arbitration is something we've been doing for a long time.
Yeah.
And, it's important for people to kind of understand what it is and how to take advantage of it, because it's a great service for realtors, and it's a big benefit to being a member of the association.
It is. So, let's start off. Baseline, what is arbitration and how does it differ from all the other processes that we have?
Yeah, absolutely. So arbitration, kind of in the general sense, not just realtor arbitration, but arbitration broadly, it fits within this category that as lawyers, we talk about alternative dispute resolution. And really what that means
ADR.
is exactly ADR, alternative dispute resolution. And that's really become a big thing within the last, I guess really when I graduated law school and was going through law school, it was really ramping up. It's always been around in some way, shape, or form, but it's really been pushed a lot more as an alternative to filing a lawsuit. And that's really what we're talking about. It's a way to resolve disputes that doesn't involve going down to district court and filing a lawsuit. Because what you can expect if you go file a lawsuit, for those that have been through it, unfortunately, it'll happen at some point. Could happen that a client sues you, or you never know. There's
something happens.
Something can happen, but in almost every case, it's a giant headache. It takes a long time, perhaps years, to resolve. It can be very costly. It can be a real nightmare going through litigation, a long, drawn out, terrible process. And so anytime we can have an alternative to that to resolve something quicker, cheaper, easier, and still get to a good result in the end, man, that's a great option for us.
Yeah.
And so that's where arbitration and mediation fit in as alternative ways to try to resolve these disputes. And that's what we're going to talk about, because we offer that specifically for realtors here at the association.
I think that's awesome.
Free.
Yeah.
I don't want to say free.
Because it's in your dues.
It is, and there is a filing fee, but it's minimal. We're talking minimal costs to take advantage of this as opposed to litigation.
Right.
So in terms of realtor-specific arbitration, it's important to remember that it is mandatory. And I think that's one of the things that we wanted to start out talking about, because if you are a member of the association, Article 17 of the Code of Ethics says that in the event there is a contractual dispute or certain specific non-contractual disputes between realtors associated with different firms and arising out of your relationship as realtors, so something business related, then you are required as a member of the association to submit to arbitration to resolve that dispute.
Like, you have to try this before you take further legal action.
Yeah, and in many cases, legal action, for the most part, isn't even going to be available. Like, you can't go sue somebody over a commission dispute, right? A procuring cause type dispute. You have to go through arbitration. This is something that as realtors, we've all agreed we're going to go through binding arbitration as opposed to filing a lawsuit. So it's a mandatory process on most kinds of disputes that come up. But people shouldn't look at that as a negative, right? It's a positive, because again, there's a lot of great benefits associated with this. But we wanted to start out by saying that, Article 17 of the Code of Ethics does make it mandatory for the types of arbitrable dispute. That's a tough word, arbitrable.
There's a lot of new words coming out here.
And we're not going to edit that one out. We're going to leave that in because, it's okay to stumble over the words. Don't feel bad.
Arbitrable
disputes. Yeah. So, that's kind of the first step, is that when you have arbitration, some sort of dispute that can go through arbitration, you're going to have to do that as a realtor. And again, we're talking primarily about contractual disputes and some non-contractual disputes, but we'll just kind of go through a couple examples of what that looks like. And then again, how does that process work? What do you have to do to take advantage of it, so that that if something like this comes up, right where you can go to get this stuff resolved?
Yeah. So I think first let's talk about, if there is a problem, how do they request arbitration, and kind of get that process started, and then let's dive into a couple of examples of what could be an arbitrable situation.
Perfect. So the way that you take advantage of it is if you're familiar with any of our professional standard stuff, because this kind of works the same way for ethics complaints as well. But for arbitration, we have an online form that you can fill out. And so you've got some dispute with another realtor, another firm, broker to broker kind of dispute that comes up. You can go online to okrealtors.com/ethics. And you scroll down a little bit, and there's a section where you can fill out an online form to start that process. You submit a complaint. And complaint's probably not a great word for it. That's what we call it, just to give it a name. But really, it's a request for arbitration.
You submit your story.
Yeah, right. So you go through this fairly straightforward form, and you put who you are, you list who the other parties are. And this is important to get right, because we have to arbitrate with the right parties. For something like a commission dispute, you've got to name the other broker and the other brokerage. So you're talking about whoever you got to name the firm on the other side and any individuals you think that are important to name as parties to that.
Because as the main point, it's not agent to agent, it's broker to broker.
Correct. That's correct. So we're talking about really realtor principals, which are the brokers and the firms that they're associated with, that they are required to arbitrate with each other. So, and we'll get into who we don't arbitrate for a little bit later, but that's who primarily we're talking about. So if you've got a commission dispute, so if you're a sales associate or a broker associate, you're not the managing broker or branch broker. You're going to have to, you've got a commission dispute of some kind. You're going to have to get your broker to join in on that. Because that's who really has control over commissions, right? The brokers receive commissions and pay it out to their associates. So if you're an associate, you've got to get your broker involved in the arbitration, and you need to name the broker on the other side of the transaction, as well as any associates that you think are a part of it. And then go ahead and name the firm as well, right? So you're going to name the brokerage too. So it's just kind of name everybody kind of thing, just because you have to name the parties who you can actually recover from.
Right.
So that's kind of step one.
And in that step, if the broker doesn't agree or isn't on board or is like, yeah, it's might not be worth it, whatever the reason is, if the broker is not on board, you can't do this.
Yeah, that's generally going to be correct, because again, it requires you to have those realtor principles as part of it. So you really have to go through your broker and make sure your broker's on board, because that's who's recovering the commission, right? If you win, then that money is going to first go to your broker, and then they're going to pay the commission out as they do in whatever manner that you do within your firm. So it is important to make sure that your broker's involved and you got the broker on the other side as well.
Okay.
So you continue on from there, submitting your complaint, which requires things like you give us a narrative of what the facts are. You attach any documents and evidence that you think are important. And again, on this, I want to encourage people to make sure that you submit as much evidence that is relevant. Don't just give everything, right? But anything that's relevant, right? Give us copies of contracts, give us copies of text messages and emails and things like that. We want to make sure we have sufficient information so that when it's reviewed, then we can, on our end, through our professional standards committee, make sure we've got all the information necessary to make that decision of, yes, we should do this, no, we shouldn't do it. So again, you continue on with that, submit all your information as a complaint or a request for arbitration, and then we move on to the next step of the process, which is having a grievance panel review it.
So the panel meets, or they don't meet, they initially review it, and then they meet.
Correct.
And then they decide whether this is something that will be put forward, or that, like maybe there's no case here, there's no merit, and it just dies right there.
Correct. So once the grievance panel gets a copy of the complaint or the request for arbitration and they have a chance to review it, they will meet. And again, these are people that come from our professional standards committee. They've been through training. So they take a look at it and say, is this something that we can arbitrate? So basically, is it an arbitrable issue, which again are these things we're talking about of contractual disputes between realtor principals, those kinds of things. And if so, does it fit within our framework of the things that we can arbitrate? And if so, then they'll just say, yes, this will move on to a hearing. And if they say no, then they'll say, well, we're going to dismiss this because it's not an arbitrable issue. We don't have the right parties named. It's not something within our jurisdiction. So you're going to have to go some other route, which may be filing a lawsuit if it's not something that fits within our arbitration framework.
Right.
But assuming that it is arbitrable, they, again, make that recommendation that it moves forward for a hearing, and we begin the process of planning for that. At that point, we give the respondent notice, so the other party, they'll get a copy of your request for arbitration and all the information you've submitted, and they have an opportunity to respond and submit evidence on their side and, go through the whole due process of defending themselves before you get to a hearing. And so we get all the documentation, all the responses, all that done. At the same time, we now have mandatory mediation. So this is another piece of that alternative dispute resolution that before we get to a hearing, our board has decided, so the state association has decided that if you're going to have arbitration, before you do that, you've got to mediate. And all that means is that you're going to sit down with a mediator, which is one of our trained mediators within our association. and you got to talk to the other party. That's all we're saying here.
Right.
You got to sit down with one of our mediators, talk to the other party, and see if you can resolve it.
And that was a new thing that was just added as a service.
Correct.
As a member benefit.
Correct. So we've always pushed people towards mediation, but it's relatively new that we have Realtor trained mediators and that it's mandatory. That's all relatively new within the last couple of years.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. Yes, it requires some time to sit down and resolve it, but we have a pretty good track record where a number of our arbitrations are getting resolved. And on top of that, there's a key reason why you want to mediate. When you go to an arbitration hearing, the hearing panel really doesn't divide up like a commission dispute, because most of the time what we're talking about are commission disputes. Two parties are saying they're entitled to the commission. The arbitration panel is going to pick a party and it's all or nothing. That's what happens. And in many cases, both parties probably have some good facts on their side. They've got some amount of work that was done. They've got something that
there's some merit to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not often is it 100% to 0% where you can just guarantee one party's going to come in and win. Sometimes and oftentimes it's a coin flip or things go in a different direction because of some evidence that was submitted. And so with mediation, you have the opportunity to come up with some sort of equitable split of the commission, right? Because sometimes what we'll see on a commission dispute is the parties come in and one party did a lot of work, but maybe they're not technically the procuring cause of the transaction, okay? And what that means is they would get nothing. They may have done 50% of the work on the transaction, but they may get 0 from a hearing panel because they weren't within the framework the procuring cause. But if you sit down at mediation, that other party may say, look, I recognize that you did a bunch of the work, so let's split this thing 50-50 and let's move on down the road, avoid a hearing and be done with this. So you can settle it and you can divide up the commission. You can, for anything non-monetary, there's any number of things you can do to settle the case.
It's like just reaching an agreement.
Absolutely.
It's being like, hey, look, I'll do X for you and you do Y for me, and then we'll call this good.
Absolutely. It could be anything. It could be, listen,
like, let me buy you lunch.
Yeah. Or, you know what? I'm going to refer a couple clients to you. I'm going to something. I mean, it could be any number of things that aren't even monetary, but it's a great way for our brokers to sit down, resolve the issue, and move on without having a hearing. But if you can't resolve it, then we will have a hearing. Both parties have an opportunity to submit their evidence, provide testimony and everything else, and then it'll be submitted to a hearing panel, and they will make that decision who wins, which party is entitled to the commission, or in favor of the judgment of which party's successful in that arbitration. So it's a good process. And again, we can resolve this in a fraction of the time that it takes to go to district court, file a lawsuit. I mean, we can have
a fraction of the cost.
Absolutely. Much cheaper. You know, we do have a $300 filing fee. That's an administrative fee that covers the cost of, you know, mileage and printing and stuff like that for our panel members. So there is a cost associated to it. If you win the arbitration, you get your $300 back. So there is a fee associated with it. But only if you lose, technically, but you have to pay that up front. But yeah, so it's a low cost alternative.
It's like a security deposit.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, it's formalized to protect the party's process, but it's also informal, so you don't have to have an attorney. You certainly can, but you can be represented by yourself or by another realtor. So you can have realtor counsel or be represented by an attorney. And again, we all know that in many cases, attorneys can be very expensive. If you're paying by the hour, you know, you may be paying an attorney the whole amount of money that's on the line if you're not careful. So, you know, it does provide an alternative to that we can resolve things without having to go through district court, without having to spend that time and resolve it in-house, which is a really, really nice thing to be able to do.
Indeed it is. And I'm sure the people that have taken advantage of this will resonate the same sentiments. Yeah,
absolutely. So, you know, it's not fun to go through the process, but you know, I'm not going to say it's inevitable, but it does happen. And again, it's much better than getting served with a lawsuit.
Right.
Even if you lose, it's, you know, it's better than that alternative. So I think.
And I mean, how many times have you seen that it might be out of a misunderstanding or a interpretation of things, right?
sure.
So when you sit down and you talk about it, you can kind of clear the air
Absolutely.
and move on.
Absolutely. So, again, one other thing to touch on, the kinds of things that we're arbitrating. Again, we're going to arbitrate contractual disputes, so commission disputes, procuring cause disputes between brokerages. We won't arbitrate issues within the same firm. So if you've got two realtors within the same firm that have a dispute with each other, that's something you've got to go through your own broker. Let your broker mediate that or do that internally. So if you're in part of the same firm, that's not something to arbitrate. It's between separate firms.
Because then the broker would be on both sides.
Yeah, exactly. So that's something that's handled internally.
And the broker would be like, yeah, sure, I'll give you the commission.
Exactly. We can also arbitrate disputes between clients and brokers. So if you've got a listing agreement with somebody, there's some sort of dispute between you and your client, we can actually arbitrate that between you and your client. So if you're worried that your client's going to run out and sue you, or you want a form to say, look, we've got a dispute, but we need somebody to step in the middle of this, it's actually mandatory arbitration to arbitrate between you and a client if the client agrees to be bound by arbitration. So the client can opt out of it. We can't force the client.
Right. They're not bound by the code of ethics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if they choose to, then, if they come in and say, yeah, let's arbitrate this as opposed to going to court, we can do that. So, that's something to keep in mind, that if you have a dispute with the client, you can say, look, we've got this independent process through our association. It's cheaper, it's easier. Let's try to resolve it that way as opposed to going to court. That may be something to consider, that if you just think that a client's you're not going to be able to resolve it and you're worried about getting sued, something to keep in mind, that's also something that can be done. Not very common, doesn't happen too much, but it is available to kind of keep that in mind.
That's good to know.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I wanted to give you that overview of arbitration so you can see that this is a service we provide. Here's how it works, what kind of things we're dealing with, and make sure that you've got that in the back of your mind anytime some kind of dispute comes up, that we can be a help in resolving that.
Right. We're here as a resource.
Absolutely.
Use us.
On a side note,
or use Jeff.
Absolutely. On a side note, if you've got that's similar, that's less formal, we have a process called ombudsman, which is an absurd word, but all that is.
Where does that word stem from?
Man, I knew at one time. Don't ask me that. Don't put me on that spot. But we have this process that's like an informal dispute resolution. So as opposed to filing a formal arbitration and going through that whole process, we have this ombudsman process where we can use one of our trained mediators to just act as an intermediary that may just involve making phone calls between you and the other broker to try to bridge the gap to resolve some sort of dispute that you're having. Again, it's very informal. All you're doing is having some independent person that can just step in the middle, make phone calls, act as an intermediary, maybe sit down with you.
Help the parties talk.
Exactly. Just help the parties communicate if things have become difficult to deal with. Know that we have that process as well, that we can, without even a formal arbitration, help you resolve that through our ombudsman process. That's always available. We have that. We can help you resolve any of those disputes that you're having with another broker. Again, another great service that people can absolutely take advantage of to make sure that at the end of the day, we've resolved the disputes and we can all go on working together and work in the same industry and try to keep things as professional and working together while also competing with each other.
So is that something when someone requests an arbitration request, is that something that's offered before the arbitration request moves forward, or is that something they have to request separately from an arbitration request?
Yeah, once the arbitration request is filed, we generally just move forward from that point through the formal process. But if somebody calls in and says, man, I'm thinking about, filing a complaint or whatever, I've got this issue, then we might say, listen, we've got a mediator that we can assign to this to try to help you out to see if you can resolve it before you get to that point. Would you like us to do that?
That makes sense.
And we've had some success with that. We've had a couple of cases where we've been able to do that and resolve it without there being any kind of further action that's necessary. So definitely keep that in mind. You can give us a call, shoot us an email, and we'll try to help get you through that process too if you just need a little backup.
Nice. That's a good option.
Yeah.
That's a great option. So
sure.
you have a plethora of routes that you could take.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And some are easier than others.
You bet. You bet. But they're all easier than getting sued.
That
So that's the key
True.
thing to remember.
Yes.
And again, we're just trying to resolve the disputes. So
remember, if you want any more information about any of this that we talked about, go on to okrealtors.com/ethics.
yes.
And it's all right there. Arbitration, complaints, call us if you want ombudsman.
Absolutely.
And next time, Jeff's going to find out where that word stems from.
Yeah. So you can call, you can ask for me if I'm around. You can also ask for Allison.
Mm-hmm.
Allison manages all of the professional standards process. She's real sharp and is always on board too. So if I'm not available or you just want to call and talk to her as well, because maybe you don't like me, that's fine. So call and talk to Allison, and she's a great help too.
Because everyone likes Allison.
Absolutely. And get you through that process. So those are a couple of options. Or shoot us an email and we'll get you on the right track.
Yep, for sure.
Well, Nabil, I think we've made it through episode 110.
Episode 110. 111 next week.
Hey, that's exciting.
Yeah. Make a wish.
We're just moving right along, coming back every week for multiple episodes of Talking Real to bring you as much great information and content as we can. I know this one's arbitration, not real exciting, but definitely think that's some valuable information.
Yeah, in case you didn't know this was out there, or one of your realtor friends has been telling you about this problem that they're going through, boom, you now have an answer.
There you go.
You are now their resource.
Absolutely. If you found this valuable, then we really hope that you are willing to go on to Apple Podcasts or Google Play Music or wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review. Or if that's not an option or you don't know how to do that, that's okay. Contact a friend who hasn't listened to Talking Real yet and tell them how to listen so that somebody else can join in and get the information that we're trying to get out there into the community.
That's right. Just tell a friend.
Tell a friend. We appreciate your referrals.
As do all good realtors.
Absolutely. And don't forget, you can send us feedback to podcast@okrealtors.com, or if you have any questions or follow up or don't understand something we've talked about or topics you want us to explore, hit us up, podcast@okrealtors.com.
Yeah. Always love hearing from you. And
until next time, we'll see you next Tuesday on Talking Real.